My name is Alireza Ibrahimi, and welcome to AE course. Today's today's lesson is about movement of substance through the membrane. First of all, we should know that we have three types of membrane: free membrane, impermeable membrane, and semi-permeable membrane. Free permeable membrane, those membrane that all the substances can freely transport through these membrane, so freely, and impermeable membrane, those membrane that do not let any substances pass through it, and semi-permeable membrane, which is very important, and uh, our focus is on these type of membrane, semi-permeable membrane, which the cell membrane is semi-permeable. It allows certain substances pass through it, and the other substances cannot pass through it. So there are certain types of movement through the cell membrane. First, passive transport, then active transport, and vesicular transport. Passive transport can be simple diffusion, osmosis, facilitated diffusion, internet can be canal-mediated diffusion, or carrier-mediated diffusion. And also active transport, it can be primary active transport or secondary active transport. And then vesicular transport, it can be either intracellular transport or transport between the cells. Also, transport between cells, it can be exocytosis or endocytosis, and endocytosis it can be pinocytosis or phagocytosis. Today, I want to talk about simple diffusion only, and then in the next video, in the next courses, I will talk about all the others. Okay, first of all, what is diffusion? Not simple diffusion, what is diffusion? Let me explain it with a great example. Imagine you are in a metro, you're in subway, you're in a train, there are lots of people, it's crowded, and what do you want to do? You want to go from that crowded, that noisy place to the place which is quiet, you can do all things you want. So, from the crowded place, which you have a lot of collision with those people to place that is not that is not collision, and it's quiet, there is nobody else. So diffusion is like this. Diffusion particles goes from the higher concentration where you can find more uh, particles to the place, to the region that has lower concentration. Now simple diffusion, as you can see here, there is a definition for a simple diffusion. Diffusion of the particle from higher concentration area to the area that has lower concentration without extra energy, that in turn is ATP. It's called simple diffusion. Why I call it extra energy? You cannot say without any energy because these particles, they have kinetic energy. Without that energy, they cannot pass through the membrane or they cannot move. So that is why we use extra energy or ATP. And then these substances, these particle, for example, consider this figure in this diagram. You see there is a concentration, high concentration of particle in the ECF, extracellular fluid, than in ICF. Okay, so these particles want, because of that rule I just talked about, and they want to move from the higher concentration, which is outside of cell, to the inside of the cell by passing through the lipid bilayer and these phospholipid and the tails to the inside of the cells. And then this diffusion will continue until the concentration of both particles in the ICF and ECF become equal, and then the diffusion will stop. There are some factors that influence in the simple diffusion. Concentration gradient, it's so obvious why it's important. If there is no gradient, and if it's no gradient, so diffusion will not happen. But size of the particle also it's important factor because as you have a smaller particle, they can pass through the cell membrane more easily. And also lipid solubility. If they are more nonpolar and more soluble and more soluble in lipid, they can diffuse through the cell membrane more easily. And let me give you some example of the particles that pass through the cell membrane with the simple diffusion, like carbon dioxide, because it's small. Oxygen, also it's very small. It can pass through the cell membrane very easily. And then fatty acids, because they are hydrophobic. Hydrophobic, it's opposite of hydrophilic. We know that because hydrophobic, and those particles are non-polar, and these are opposite of hydrophilic. Hydrophilic. Hydrophilic, they like water, but hydrophobic, they do not like water. They like lipid. And then a steroid hormone like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and these things, they can also pass through the cell membrane with a simple diffusion. And water, but there is a important, there is a confusing thing about water. How water can pass through the cell membrane with a simple diffusion? Because you might say it's polar, and how it can pass through the cell membrane with the simple diffusion? Because water, it's so small, water molecule, and it's uncharged, so it can pass through the cell membrane with a simple diffusion. And that was all about this lecture, and in the future I will talk about osmosis, facilitated diffusion, and then active transport, vesicle transport as well. I hope it was helpful for you.